Alan Adkins, or as we endearingly refer to him as the Blue One, and you can ask him why later. He's a marine engineer, U.S. Coast Guard certification, Silicon Valley entrepreneur, key pioneer of CD-ROM industry in the areas of CD-ROM pre-mastering and CD software and systems. He is was founder CEO of Optical Media International in Los Gatos, California from 1985 to 95. He is a health and healing practitioner of over 40 years, a student of spiritual philosophy and meditation for 50 years plus. As a world traveler and researcher in areas of human spirituality, health and healing, human microbiome probiotics, energy systems, and structured water. He appeared with David William Gibbons for nearly 100 hours of dialogues on the Universal One by Walter Russell, which is a fabulous series. It is my honor and privilege to welcome a member of our Science and Research Committee who has been integral to the work that we've done here in helping to advance these concepts into demonstratable forms. It's my pleasure to introduce, please welcome Alan Lee Adkins. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Yes. Good morning, everyone. Morning. Welcome to this fine day. So as is my practice, I'd like to dedicate this and everything to the Divine One, that which is self-aware, eternal, omnipotent, that which has always been, is now, and always will be, all that is. And, just like some warning labels on certain products that you might see, any reference to any people or persons is solely to make or emphasize a point and is not intended as a judgment or ego-based objectification. Warning, actual inner acknowledgement of the truth may cause or eventually lead to an increase in real and true divine awareness and destruction of false paradigms. So, just how does one come to know the real truth about creation? We are, all of us, endowed with a centering awareness which is a seed of a sort of divine consciousness. This is a popular image, it seems like, in presentations. So just to elaborate a little bit, this seed of conscious awareness within us happens to be not in a physical location, but it correlates with the pineal gland, which is typically behind in the location of what's considered to be the third eye and connected to our sahasrara. So one thing about that is something we do all have. The question really is, do we have access to that? And what is the process of facilitating a greater functioning access to that place within us? So who was Walter Russell? What is the legacy of his life? Bears repeating. I'm going to have a little bit of a different take on it today, and for reasons that you'll see soon. And a lot of the comments I'm going to make are not only for the audience today, but who may eventually see the presentation in the future in one media or another. So the awakening of our inner awareness stems from life experience. And in Walter's case, it was, as we know, he had pivotal 7-year experiences every 7 years up until the major one when he was 49. And he did have all these accomplishments. He was a consummate musician, architect, painter, sculptor, figure skater. He, through his illumination, was inspired to become a very remarkable author and a true natural scientist. And this is a quote that Lyle Russell made about Walter: being enabled to envision the whole of every effect in nature and not just a small section of its cycle. He is painting many pictures of the cyclic effects, electrical, chemical, and astronomical, including the visible geometric forms of wave fields in space and the visible effects which these space forms control. Thus, the birth and death of matter, the growth and formation of atomic systems of the entire 9-octave range, from the inert gases to incandescent solids, the wave, the electric current itself and its cathodes to anodes, which center loops of force, all these are being diagrammed and pictured in their full spectrum range. It's a lot to take in, but inimitable as he was. What is Russellian cosmogony? It is, in my view, an exceptionally well-related, true-to-truth, detailed, perfectly balanced, symmetrically unified, divinely scientific description of how the Creator projects creation based on direct experiential observation and in the driver's seat view, as it were, of the entire process. And it definitely is something, and this is important, we can all come to know for ourselves experientially. The issue then, one might say, is how to develop the knack with which to accomplish the experiential knowing. The skill of accessing the still inner point of light, the seat of divine witness consciousness awareness, is the key to developing and increasing access to inner knowing. And this brings me to one of the main critical junction points and fulcrum points, if you want to call it that, with my presentation today. This is a bust of Mark Twain done by Walter, very appropriate. And so, for those of you who are not familiar with this, this is how it goes. It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you think you know for sure that just isn't so. What is Russellian science? Russellian science is simply the precise, correctly perceived, and completely true to nature and implementable creation to solution dynamics of every single body to science, all of which can be verified and demonstrated using the real, actual scientific method. You've heard as of late, we have fake news, we have had fake science. So today we're talking about the foundation of real science and how to differentiate between the fake and the real. The cardinal error of science lies in shutting the Creator out of his creation. This one basic error topples the whole structure, for out of it all, the other misconceptions of light, matter, energy, electricity, and magnetism and atomic structure have grown. The history of humanity is full of realizations where previously assumed so-called truths, so-called laws, or widely held beliefs eventually are shown to be either entirely incorrect or partially true. And again, setting up what's to come, it ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you think you know for sure that just isn't so. So how do we go about telling the difference? So that particular mindset is something that can lead us down many rabbit holes and is something that can be continuously elaborated upon profusely. Here's a short list. Some of them didn't make it, but these are things that many people honestly, really, and truly think are correct. which in fact are not. It's only when one is given real and true divine insight through direct experience can one know. And even then, the knowing that is experienced, as it were, does not come from anywhere other than within yourself, within ourselves. Case in point, light is not waves which travel at 186,000 miles per second, which science says it is, nor does light travel at all. An inconvenient truth for some, perhaps, but light is everywhere already. It doesn't really need to travel. Even the so-called luminaries of our human science, Newton, Coulomb, Einstein, and so many others, made their fundamental errors in their assumptions because of their limited sense-based observations. And until we develop the knack of getting a familiar, a working knowledge of our fulcrum witness of consciousness, we're destined and enslaved by our senses to tell us what we think to be true. The Coulomb Law statement that opposites attract and likes repel is not true to natural law. How could it be? Opposite conditions are opposite conditions. Likewise, they are opposite effects caused by each thrusting in opposite directions. It is not logical to say that opposites fulfill any other office than to oppose, nor is it logical to say that opposing things attract each other. In all this universe, like conditions seek like conditions. Gases and vapors seek gases and vapors by rising to find them, and solids and liquids seek solids and liquids by falling towards them. Very practical, very common sense, but you'd be surprised. Opposite poles of a bar magnet thrust away from each other as far as they can go. That is the very purpose of the electric current which divides the universal equilibrium. If opposite poles attracted each other, they would have to be together in the middle instead of pushing away from each other at the very ends. And this is something that Darren is going to get more in depth into later on, but these are things to realize that these are some of the things that can be proven through actual experimental, empirical evidence. Scientific observers have been mightily deceived by their senses into thinking that opposites attract each other because of seeing the north pole of one magnet pull toward the south pole of another magnet. If the Coulomb Law were valid, it would not be possible to gather 1 ounce of any one element. So again, the truth is really always staring us in the face, but our sense-based feedback leads us astray. So very important to become ever more familiar with our common sense. Oops. Okay. Here's a Russell quote. The theory claims not only that the energy is within matter, but that it exists in bundles. Its very basis has no relation to nature anywhere, nor to the workings of polarity, the great divider, nor to the electric wave. So since we can't see the other half of the wave through our senses, we have to intuit it, and we can, as we have heard repeatedly, and I'll reiterate, we can see it and know it. We can know it. The only vibrations there are in nature are those interchanges between the two opposites of polarity, which extend from a fulcrum zero to a plus and minus zero. These are the destination points between which motion oscillates in sequences of reversals. The reversals are the pulse beats of nature. And it's interesting to point out that this kind of information has been discussed using different languages, different different nuances, but has been revealed and reiterated through thousands and thousands of years. As we know, this didn't happen, but you can understand why Tesla had felt that he needed to bring this point up to Walter. We're about to find out if the current time is the time. So, the divine brings into creation the seeming apparent differences in all the myriad forms through the one, emerging, projecting the polarized light. And this is happening, of course, in a three-dimensional, this is a two-dimensional diagram, but this is actually happening, if you can envision it, three-dimensionally. And this place in the center of our head is very exactly, precisely representative of this, and the place from which our own conscious awareness emerges. When asked for his opinion on the theories of contemporary Albert Einstein, Tesla gave a scathing analysis of relativity theory, calling it a magnificent mathematical garb which fascinates, dazzles, and makes people blind to the underlying errors. The theory is like a beggar clothed in purple, whom ignorant people take for a king. A little bit of an acerbic wit there, but the point here is not to belittle or judge or demean anybody. That's really not the point here. The point is that we live in a world that honors and creates and fabricates a respect for that which is not even true. So it behooves us to try to exercise and develop our muscle of discrimination in everything. In particular science, but not only that, it's true in so many areas, isn't it? So a few useful definitions. Walter Russell. Creation is an electric effect of two lights projected through each other, each alternately becoming the other. Not that they weren't the other, but there is a dynamic interchange. Matter is the result of centripetal force set up by the positive white light of the pair of electrical workers which seeks a center. Cause is one, unchanging divine light as rest. Effect is two unchanging lights in motion. Let us never forget this. This is very key. White light is positive. It is that charging light which is going toward gravity, contracting as it gravitates. Black light, or the opposite, is opposing so-called negative light. It is that light which is going toward space, expanding as it radiates. Electricity, and this is really very fascinating and wonderful to contemplate. I encourage all of us to do that. Electricity is, yes, that which is coming out of your wall socket and all forms of it, is that elastic quality within light which manifests as two opposed strains pulling against each other, away from and toward a center. When the equilibrium of light is divided into two opposed pressures by the cosmic action of divine thinking. This is not on the test for electrical engineering. An equilibrium or static condition is a state of rest in which there is perfect balance everywhere. A dynamic condition is one which opposing electric forces attempt to upset the balance of the universe. Can't really happen, but this is what has to happen for there to be what we think and feel and know to be creation. Through motion, and succeeded only in creating two equal and opposite unstable conditions which balance each other but are each out of balance with their source. And the out of balance part is only an apparency. It's not really out of balance, but there is the element of time interjected, so there is an appearance of it. It is the condition of two unbalanced conditions which produces motion and expressed energy. Imagination is the ability of static divine consciousness to divide and multiply the whole cosmic idea into three-dimensional forms of many seeming parts of the one idea and give them the appearance of motion in a time and space universe. And all of this experience is mediated through that which is in the center of our head, in the form of a very tiny sphere, bluish, iridescent blue sphere. Imagination is that quality within the conscious light which expresses desire for creative expression by simulating its divine reality with illusion of reality. And it works very well. The divine Maya of the Creator is perfectly designed to create a very, very effective illusion of reality. But we can recognize and know that from which it arises. The gravitation and irradiation are the electric results of the two opposed pressures, compression and expansion, which are produced by the extension and retraction of the one light from vertical points in space. Just as we see here, we have points in space that is 9 zeros which bound the three projection mirrors which cause the illusion of a three-dimensional universe. And here we see the build-up, the progressive build-up of how this occurs in Walter's cubic wave field model. We see the emergence from the interface between the unmanifest and the manifest, the centripetal vertical vortices of light in the cubic wave field model. This is an example of how the seesaw motion, the cyclic compression, expansion, and all the different possible permutations that can happen in creation. This is actually proving, if you could let yourself have the space and the discrimination to recognize that it is a simple thing. Creation is not complex. We mightily deceive ourselves through sensory observations and needlessly complicate almost everything. These kind of dynamic manifestations are not easily visible, but they can be known, and they can actually be seen as well. In fact, there are people alive on the planet that can see the unseen part of the wave. It's not that it's impossible, it's just not normally the case, but there are rare exceptions. And so if you could see it, as Walters did and others have seen in their expanded witness conscious state, they can see the actual patterning of how the divine light separates itself into the polarized light and then how it interchanges. Interchanges through constant interchange. Life and death meet as equals at their equator. And here we have one, in science anyway, we have one of the most profound examples that Walter Russell, fundamental to his science, you might say, of his, this is the Mendeleev chart of the elements dating back from 1904. This has been updated somewhat in the years since, but the essential, the fact that hydrogen is presented as the first element we know is completely invalid. And then, as Russell says, the above is a reproduction of the Mendeleev periodic table of the elements as published in the modern textbooks. It is the present chemical record of the visible universe of the range of matter within the perception of man, as of the year 1904. And as I said, this has been updated somewhat, but nevertheless, the inherent inaccuracies still persist. It is correct only in the orderly periodicity of atomic weight, which is mass dimension. In all other dimensions and periodicities, it is wrongly arranged. There is no eighth group. All marked with a circle are out of place in octave periodicity, and those marked with an X are properly placed. The inert gases of the zero group are incomplete, and 3.5 octaves are entirely missing. Whoops. The chart is not a workable or practical chart for chemists' use, for it in no way relieves them of the necessity of experimenting in their laboratories to find out that which should be known in advance of experimenting. And this is the advantage that one has if you actually know versus you're just trying to stumble around in the dark, trying to figure it out. So, it would behoove us, all of us, to take note and to carefully listen and acknowledge Walter Russell's correct perceptions that have also been confirmed. This is one of the amazing things that Walter has been written out of history, it would seem so effectively, when in fact he is the only person I know who created the only correct table of the elements that will completely revolutionize and upgrade almost the entire field of every known science. All periodicities of all effects of motion can be properly arranged on a workable and dependable chart, such as that which has been herein published. Incomplete as this chart is, Duncan says it is of it in the New Knowledge. This periodic law of the atoms is God's alphabet of the universe. By means of it, and by means of it only, can we ever hope to spell out the history and the future of creation. It lies here before us, lacking only the master word, the open sesame, to creation, and who knows, to the Creator too. So here's the inaccurate chart, and here's the accurate one, two-dimensional. This is actually happening in three-dimensional space, but it points out some very important parts, that there are numerous elements before hydrogen, entire octaves, in fact, and the correct placement of the inert gases, and pointing out that the inert gases emerge, or the elements in each octave emerge from the inert gas in the rhythmic balanced interchange fashion in lock potential, and take their place in the lock potentials position. We have the two different ways of visualizing the same basic insight. So we have on the left the inaccurate, imprecise, sense-based attempt. And again, this is not to denigrate or badmouth anybody, it's just pointing out a simple fact, and that it behooves us to recognize the truth as the truth and to follow that and not continue our stumbling around in the dark, as it were. Yes, indeed, there is but one dynamic force. Gravitation is the desire of electricity to integrate into the appearance of form. Radiation is the desire of magnetism to disintegrate into the disappearance of form. And this is a fundamental building block of the science that we're doing and that will be performed in the centuries to come. We see that this fundamental centripetal winding up vortices of light is replete and throughout nature. It is everywhere, as of course it needs to be. Incandescence is the resultant effect produced by multiplying the universal equilibrium in one half of the wave cycle and equally dividing it in the other half, which simultaneously produces vacuous blackness. These two oppositely unbalanced effects are produced at the expense of each other, each giving to the other and then re-giving to restore balance and repeat their givings and re-givings in reverse, each becoming the other. So here we have Walter Russell's famous painting. That we see that in three-dimensional space, the light emerges and takes its cyclonic, centripetal, and centrifugal pathways. And that this is actually, if you could see it, and one of the things I deal with is things that are on the nanoscale. What we're talking about here is far more finer than that, but we can see the patterning. And this is true to form. This is, if you could see it, this is exactly what you would see if you could see the dynamic of how the divine creates creation. And great, this is the key to, this is the open sesame, you could say, that Walter refers to, is the ability to understand what you're actually looking at in this painting. These are some of the books that I recommend, particularly with respect to the science. I'm sure you're all familiar with this, but just to reiterate, and for the purposes of who may view this in the future. So with that, I'm going to open up the this part to questions. Do you have questions? Yeah. Yes.
I was curious what comment you might have on the practical applications of the Russell science. You know, a couple of bullets on areas of breakthrough that would be based on this model rather than traditional models.
Well, as many of you know, we have been working on actual practical demonstrations of Russell science, and we have made breakthroughs. One of the things I can say on that is, in our particular day and age, we live in a society and a world that has been hijacked in so many ways. And so even though we may be able to demonstrate energy devices or other devices that very clearly violate the so-called, what they call known laws of physics that are in fact completely not correct, and that are being held on to by the establishment or the powers that shouldn't be, as we might say. The issue that we have is more, not so much can we do it, can we demonstrate that we can produce energy far more in abundance than what you might be perceived that you put into the device, which is the so-called second law of thermodynamics. That's completely invalid, and we've already proven that. And so that isn't really the difficult part. The difficult part is, as Russell himself ran into with his interactions with people in the science back in his day, that there is an established direction that things are going in, and they want to maintain the status quo. And so the issue more is everything to do about how do we proceed with that more of in a relation standpoint. What we're talking about in the theme of the conference, the new era of human relations. So we have the new era of revelation of the true science, but we also have to have in balance with that the advance in human relations, so that we actually can, look at what we're doing, and can we release technology to the world in such a way that the world can receive it and equitably and in a balanced manner utilize it for the good of all of humanity. And that's not that's not something that's supported by the establishment that wants to nothing more than to maintain or even further lock down their power and control. So basically, we interpret the fundamental understanding of what electricity is, meaning that it's the one force that is polarized and that we have polarity dynamics. And so if you understand that correctly, then you can make so-called electrical devices or other kinds of devices that are true to nature and that you can easily amplify. And there's no scientific reason why we can't power the world without any overt fuel. Literally, energy is everywhere. It is everything. Energy is everything. It's not in the mass like science is trying to tell us, but it is everywhere.
Sounds like a timing.
It's a timing. It's very much a timing thing. Everything is about timing. Wave cycles within wave cycles, it's all timed. And so we're waking up to a time when it becomes progressively more doable, and that the appearances of the fake science, the fake truth that has been espoused and promulgated and reinforced all these thousands of years in the modern age is now starting to, there are cracks in the seams, as it were. The edifice is crumbling. So, but it's really, when we introduce new technology, how do we do that, and to whom does it go to, and how do they hold that? How do they utilize that in such a way as to not fall prey to greed, the old, tired story of greed and control?
I just have a quick question, Alan. You quoted Tesla as saying that the Russells should lock up the cosmic knowledge for 1,000 years. Do you have a date for that? No, a date when he made that statement.
I don't know who.
Between 1921 and 1932.
In answer to your question, I don't know the exact date. We do have attribution, though, that was in fact the case. And really, I would say the significance of that statement more is who's making the statement. That, and there were hundreds of people who got the Universal One, and not very many people really got back to Walter Russell after he had sent, just out of the goodness of his heart, he wanted to share that highest knowledge of him, his revelation. And Tesla is one of the few people who did come back to him. And of all the people alive on the planet at the time, Tesla had to have been one of the only people that could really maybe begin to understand what Walter Russell was saying and appreciate it. And coming for him to make a statement like that, of course, he had already been through the experience of what it was like to be, a kind of illuminate in an electrical sense for the world, and what had happened to him. So he knew very well that, the average person, or even so-called the intelligentsia, had very little, if any, capability to even really understand what he was even saying. And that's still pretty much true today, although we have some openings, I would say.
So just to reflect on what you said, then Tesla's comment is a response to Walter publishing the Universal One.
Right.
Okay.
And we also know that I'm not going to bring it up in this forum, but suffice it to say that other massive edifices that control or feel that they control the planet were also aware of the Universal One, what it was actually revealing and trying to say. It was very much an inconvenient truth for them, and put at risk their entire false narrative, you could say.
There's a question over here, Alan. At the back.
Yeah, yes.
Thank you. I have, you mentioned briefly working on the nanoscale. If you wish to share a particular challenge you have had in your line of work.
Well, as it happens, I'm working with something that's actually quite Russellian, you might say, in nature, a carbon-60, which is otherwise known as carbon C60, which is a spherical carbon molecule. And one of those molecules is a little bit over 1 nanometer in size. And so, you can't see that even with an electron microscope. You might be able to see it with a variant tunneling electron microscope, but we're dealing with things that are just, you could say, barely there. And so we don't have scientific equipment to using our sense-based awareness to accurately measure these things at that scale. We are doing so, but it's, we're getting down to the level of interface between our capability and our supposition. And that's where science gets into trouble, because they do make these, what they may think is their best guess, but it is simply that, it's a guess. And our entire scientific paradigm, in many respects, is based on false narrative. And so how can you expect real and accurate progress when you're basing your, at least major sections of science, and not just physics or chemistry, but the whole gamut, based on false and inaccurate assumptions. And so it's no wonder that we are chasing our tail. We should be much further along with, since Tesla for over 100 years, we should be much further along. But yet we're not.
I had two questions. With some of these devices, these over-unity devices that people have come up with, do you sometimes see changes in like gravity and time? And then also, with Tesla saying that this should be locked up for 1,000 years, is that because that this technology, if it really got, compact enough to where people could have make weapons with stuff like this, that it would be better that we not have it? There might be an altruistic reason why this is suppressed for the masses, just because people are not really always very moral.
No, they're not. Well, I think Tesla's developments, his technological developments, have been weaponized, very, very, almost definitely. I mean, I'm not personally directly familiar with that, but I'm very confident that it has been weaponized, and it really goes to the point of, we have a faction of individuals, and again, this is not the forum to get off down that rabbit hole, but basically there are people who have very specific reasons and agendas for keeping the status quo more or less under their control. And this kind of information in the religion, spiritual side of things, and in the scientific side of things, very much threatens pretty much the entire fundamental basis of academic science. And so, the problem that we've run into is that we identify our line of work, if we're a scientist or a professor or have any major position in academic science, whatever it is, that we tend to base our very identity on our knowing of whatever knowledge we thought we gained. And so when you pay huge money and spend years of your life getting, thinking that you're getting, to the pinnacle of education, only to find out that you've been lied to and deceived the entire time, it's not a very fun experience. And again, it's not about judgment. It shouldn't be anyway. It's just about seeing things for what they really are. Well, we have wave cycles, and I think, in fact, we have seen that some of the science, like the speed of light, which is supposed to be a constant, isn't a constant. It actually speeds up and slows down according to certain, more fundamental wave cycles. And that I think we're entering into a period like that in even more profound ways right now, based on what we have going on the planet. I think we can expect more intense weather, geoplanetary changes based on these planetary cycles that have been and are continuing to enter into.
Alan, I was just curious, with your knowledge of the science, would it even be possible to develop a plug-in device, since we all have electricity already coming to our homes? A plug-in device that we would have the use of the electricity in our homes, but our electric meter would go in reverse?
Yeah, until they find out you're doing that, yeah. But yes, you will be able to have coming up a device that you can, if you have an existing house with existing grid-connected electricity, you will be able to plug in devices and utilize efficiencies far in excess of what you're putting in. And then you'll have off-grid people who are not connected to the grid will have the ability to produce as much power as they like without any overt fuel, solar or wind or otherwise. I'm sorry? It will be at the appropriate time. Again, like I said, I'm not trying to be, evasive or anything, but the issue very much is not, is it possible to do technically? It's far more challenging to utilize it in any kind of a public way without expecting certain repercussions. And that's where the human society, the future of our human race needs to, we like to say, well, we don't like the pollution, we don't like this or that, but we have to be willing to step up and recognize that the reasons why things are the way they are. It's not what we've been told or we're being educated about. I mean, that is being subverted and it is very intentional as well. And it's something we have to recognize, and then we as a society, as groups of people, we have to organize and be committed to demanding that, and not settling for lies and deception.
Alan, I had a personal question for you. As a science-minded individual, and you would think that scientists, the reason you're a scientist is you're looking for that greater truth, that greater understanding. And to hear you talk about how science and scientists are rejecting science. And my question to you was, is your personal experience, you grew up in that orthodox education system, and what was it for you that moved you over into Russellian science and rejected the...
Well, just to let you know, I didn't even graduate 11th grade in my case. So I was not a good student. I did not accept brainwashing very readily. Even though maybe I didn't really realize it, honestly, I didn't know that it was brainwashing. It just didn't feel right. Now that I have some more perspective on it, I very much realize what, and again, it's not a judgment, and I'm not trying to denigrate or belittle education, except that people really should learn how to learn and not be just programmed, indoctrinated.
Because, this science stares the world in the face. And for science to just constantly reject it, and I think you used the correct word, establishment, and if we could ever identify who the establishment is, right? That's who needs to be sitting here.
Well, as they say, follow the money.
Yes.
But the whole money system itself is a contrived artifice. So.
Yes, I just want to voice a question I've had before. When Walter experienced his 39-day illumination, did he need to eat, sleep, excrete, drink water? how did he function for 39 days?
Well, no, he was not in a complete catatonic state, as I
Okay.
understand it, but, so he did, yes, but, it's really where the focus is. I mean, you can be not laying down, you can stand up and move around and eat or drink without being disconnected from that deeper, full-on witness conscious experience.
I had wondered, and the other thing is, what can we, the average citizen here, do to
Okay.
invite those kind of experiences into our own lives?
Right. So in my talk last year at the last homecoming, I talked a little bit about, mostly about the spiritual side of things with respect to this message. And I brought up the tactic or the technique, which is probably the single best technique for you to understand the science or any aspect of creation, whatever it is you in particular desire or that might be of interest to you now or in the future. The single best technique to do that, to develop the ability, the knack to be in this, to be in a knowing state where you can actually directly perceive and know, because all that knowledge is within us. It really is. It's not just a cute phrase. It is actually true. And so because of our sense-based awareness and all the different ways that we know that we have the sense-based awareness, the best technique is to realize that you within yourself have the ability to watch, to observe your mind. You can actually watch and observe what you're thinking in your mind. And if you do that, and again, if you're not used to doing that, you have to begin a practice, and then you as you're interested and as your intent increases, your desire to know is what drives this process. But basically, you keep watching your mind, and as you carefully watch your mind more and more and more, then you'll see, of course, what you're thinking, but then you'll also, as you drop down deeper, you'll see why you're thinking the thoughts that you have, whatever they may be, and why you're feeling the emotions you have, because you're observing it. So we just need to develop, it's like a muscle. You develop the knack of knowing by observing from that place within us that is actually in the fulcrum, in the center, in the stillness. I mean, it's talked about in all religious, spiritual disciplines in various ways. And it's talking really about the same thing. So spiritual practice is nothing more, regardless of the type or style, the purpose of it is to allow you to do that, to still your mind, and then and then it happens naturally through contemplative awareness. You watch it more and more and more. And as you do that, you go deeper, and then you can see the spaces open up, and then you can actually hold in your mind's eye and as you read Walter Russell, the secret of understanding Walter Russell's science and what he's actually saying, which is so challenging probably for most people, is that they need to, as they're reading each word and sentence, throw it up in their mind's eye and actually visualize what he's saying for ourselves, within ourselves, because that knowledge is already in us. And so all we have to do is basically resonate with it, and then we'll just rise up.
It's like a cosmic form of therapy, yes.
It's the ultimate therapy.
Okay. Thank you for addressing that. Thank you.
Sure.
Hi, I don't know you. I came down here from New York. My sister's been trying to get me to read these books for 30 years, and I finally saw something about the science that just totally clicked for me. It kind of validated every thought I've had about everything that you guys are talking about. And with regard to the spiritual aspects of all of us as human beings, I think we're all on a separate journey, and that's an evolutionary process, and I have lots of great ideas being new to this in terms of the community aspects and the spiritual aspects. Like, I'd love to see a group like this be up at the castle in a circle each of us all sharing our knowledge. I think in terms of love and unity and balance, that would feel more like that to me, although I'm very greatly enjoying all of everybody here. But the thing I'm kind of interested in, I don't know your work and I don't know you, but it sounds like you're a science guy. And I was actually thinking what the woman over there was talking about with the plug-in device, because I'm trying to think of practical ways to utilize this powerful information that has come to a real head for me, that I'm very interested in going deeper in a spiritual way, like the gentleman there, and in every possible way. And I also know that we as human beings aren't necessarily ready for everything like you were talking about. But on the other hand, I've always wanted to be off the grid, and this is a perfect thing for me, thinking of you as a science guy. Like, I'd like to see your thing sold on University of Science and Philosophy so that I could use it.
We would too, actually.
So I'm kind of, so I don't know who you are or what you do, but I'd like to know a little bit more. Maybe I missed that or something, but also I understand your reticence, but like, what is there for us to possibly utilize? I mean, specifically, not in a big amorphic way, but I really want to know specifically what are you working on and what things could possibly help in that regard. If at least that's one way we could all benefit from this wonderful knowledge.
So like we've said and announced before in different ways, we are working on technology and making better than great progress, I would say. And you know, if people think that you can, you know, completely invalidate the entire energy paradigm at play on the Earth today, just like flip the switch, it isn't going to happen that way. It can't happen that way. But things are changing. Things are changing. Yes, and I would say once some of the technology is commercialized, you could say, it'll probably be, you know, a gradual thing, at least publicly, and the off-grid people are going to stand to benefit tremendously. And self-sufficiency, I think, is an important signpost for humanity, that we would serve ourselves very well to not be so reliant on the, you know, on the central government for very much of anything. The more self-sufficient we can be, the better, with food and energy and water. And water, you know, by the way, I didn't have a chance to mention that, but the water, the Earth does not have a finite supply of water. The Earth is generating water 24/7. It's called primary water. There's a gentleman named Stephen Reese who's proven that, and Walter Russell even describes in the Universal One exactly how to generate water directly. Not you know, precipitate it from the atmosphere or drill a well, but to actually generate water, alchemically transmute it at will. And in fact, the Earth itself is doing that just above the mantle all the time. There's never going to be a true shortage of water or scarcity of water on Earth. It's not going to happen. Thank you.